Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, a hoop ball presentation. I am Dan Besbris, still adjusting my headset, and the other man, the man that you've been listening to a lot, an awful lot. He's a busy fella. It's Vince Miracle. He is sitting in a reclined pose right now. Vince, are you feeling tired or something?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling ready. This is the first time in a long time I feel like I haven't been in the hosting chair. So now I get to sit back and hear all these questions coming in and answer them as the analysis
I'm feeling
or as
ready.
the analyst.
Apologies. That was just a mild user error on my end. We got that all sorted out. Yeah. So this right now, this podcast today is exclusively being dedicated to question and answer. It'll almost be a continuation, Vince, of what you guys are doing right now on Fantasy NBA Tonight. And with that in mind, we came ill prepared to talk about much unless folks are able to chime in and help us out and get those questions into the YouTube window chat, and we'll be watching it throughout our Fantasy NBA Today broadcast. Vince, I know a lot of folks have their drafts coming up right now, so I got to think that a lot of the questions are pertaining to that. What were some of the big ones that you experienced last night on your show with Jake Cousins that maybe we could slide over and address today before anybody even gets in and asks some of their own?
A lot of the questions that we got are about the Brewski 150, about some of the rankings that come in there, but a lot of it is coming down to from last night, I should say, was about Victor Oladipo, and is he really a second round type of player? Do you believe in the hype that he's bringing right now to OKC? And that was what a lot of our conversation was. We talked about it in the beginning, it popped back up in the middle, and then once again at the very end about Oladipo and Jokic, and are they worth a second and third round pick? And that was a majority of the conversation yesterday.
Yeah, and I guess we can go over that. You've probably already expressed your thoughts on it a few times. My take on it, and I saw some of those questions coming by because I happened to, Vince, join in and harass you and Jake for the last 20 minutes or so of your show last night. But my thought really is that Oladipo is, to me, a pretty reliable early third round guy. There was some talk about maybe being able to flip him for John Wall or vice versa. And my thought on that one certainly is that John Wall is a much more reliable fantasy player and someone that you know what you're going to get out of. Whereas Oladipo, there's still a little bit of a question mark in terms of exactly what role he's going to be playing this year. So I think the way that you guys were talking about it last night, Vince, yourself and Jake, I was in relative agreement with the two of you. And I don't know that I guess we need to spend much more time on that because it looks like we actually already have a question coming in from our buddy Angel Delgado. Vince, are you seeing this question too?
I'm pulling up the live chat right now on my end, but if you see it, go ahead and read it off.
All right, we'll get this thing going. Angel into the chat
Vince,
room.
are you seeing?
Brought up Kelly Oubre asking if we believe he will be relevant in 2016, this 2016-17 season. So Vince, I'll turn that one over to you, and then I'll give my thoughts because I might be in the minority on this one. I'm a little worried that I am.
I actually really like Kelly Oubre. I think Kelly Oubre is going to probably be a little bit more of a deeper league type of guy, maybe a 14 to 16 team league type of asset until they figure out how many minutes that he's actually going to be seeing. I know there's a open competition happening right now between Porter and Oubre has been really showing up and making a case for that starting job position for the Wizards. But I mean, Porter has shown what he can do, and I know that Aaron and I talked about it last week about what Oubre can be, and that how Scotty Brooks kind of doesn't like throwing out 21-year-old players and playing the massive minutes when he has a veteran that's been there and has shown that he works very well with their stars like a John Wall, like a Bradley. But I mean, I think Oubre has the potential to be a 3-point specialist and also a scoring specialist, but he's going to be up and down throughout the season. So I would say wait for him in the deeper leagues if you're like 14 to 16 team type of leagues, but in standard leagues, he's more of a late round flyer.
Yeah, so I'm glad actually that that was your response. I've been hearing a lot of pro Oubre talk over the last couple of days, maybe the last week and change or so, and it's possible that people are reacting to things that they're seeing during the preseason or these stories about guys that are kind of on the fringe snowball a little bit leading up to fantasy drafts and opening day. And I think it's important to make sure that you don't buy into it too much. I think that Otto Porter is still the guy in Washington. He is. I know that they've talked about making it kind of an open competition, but that's a way to keep everybody engaged mentally. It's going to be Porter, certainly at least to start the year, and I think probably throughout. He's more seasoned. That he's a guy that they need on that team to complement the other guys in that starting five. And I think Otto Porter actually could be a top 50 guy this year. So to me, he's the guy to watch. Oubre is somebody that comes off the board in, like you said, Vince, very deep leagues. He's a middle round guy in the 30-team league that just finished up its draft. But in most fantasy leagues, 10, 12 teamers, I don't think that he even comes off the board. He's a wait and see guy right now.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see where he'll go in our league. Dan, we're getting ready to start setting up the hoop ball league with all of our experts in there, and that's probably going to be right around 15 to 20 players. Oubre falls may be a little interesting to watch as well. So we'll let you guys know once that draft has concluded.
Yeah, Aaron has actually volunteered to put up a little prize for that draft, which is going to be great because my wallet is completely empty right now. We've spent all of our money preparing for the arrival of our first child. So I'll just happily take Aaron's money, and if any of you guys want to give me some of yours, I'll just slot that in right next to it.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I mean, you're gonna get a solid second place when I get that first. So we're gonna make miracles happen. That's gonna be my team name, Making Miracles Happen.
Yeah, I'm going to figure out some team name that is a play on that that destroys it, like miracles aren't real, it's all science. I think that might be too many characters. So I think we actually got another question coming in, Vince, from our buddy Christopher Ellison Snig. He was actually in our mock draft. He says, hello, good guys. Can you name me some nice players to pick in a deep keeper league? This is a tough question. Players with upside and with a bright future. It's 8-cat. So we're actually going, this is like looking way down the line. Deep keeper league plays. Vince, I can tell you immediately, I was not prepared for this question. Do you have some thoughts on it while I do a quick little bit of digging on some fantasy websites?
Yeah, I think I have a player that's right off the top of my head, and we've been seeing him play very well through the preseason. I'm going to go with Malcolm Delaney out in Atlanta. You know, when Schroeder sits out, I mean, the backup point guard position, I think, is wide open with Jared Jack being injured. No timetable really for his return. And Delaney has really stepped in there and has showed what he can do as a starter for that team. When given the minutes, he can score. He seems very composed because of his experience overseas. So if I had to choose someone off the top of my head, Delaney.
I got to admit to you guys, this is just not something that I've looked at yet because it is such a niche question. I've been preparing so hard for number one. Aaron Bruschi was kind enough to invite me into that 30-team league, and that has required an obscene amount of focus. A draft that lasted actually from Friday at 9 a.m. until the middle of the night yesterday. So you're talking about a 4-day fantasy draft. So I haven't really dug into the rookies down kind of at the end that might do something in a couple of seasons. But, you know, I don't really mind Jaylen Brown in a spot like this. I think that some of the space in Boston may actually open up. And if you're going to take that guy that early, he's someone that they're going to be kind of building for the future or flipped to a place where he can do something interesting. So I know that that's, again, you're looking way down the line with some of these thoughts, but these are guys that are not relevant now, but could be certainly in a season or two. Christopher, I don't know if we're hitting your question exactly right. Please feel free to answer in the chat room. Are you looking for players that are relevant now already? And he's actually following up, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Ben Carnado just says hello, but no question. So I guess we'll actually jump straight to Christopher's follow-up.
Actually, we have a question we actually had a question on Twitter from J-Ball. I don't know. I'm going to say it, J-Ball.
Yeah,
and it says drafting fifth. Says drafting fifth, 9-cat head-to-head league, punting. Do Karl Anthony Towns, Clay, sense anything else?
So, Vince, you actually got out for just a moment. Karl Anthony Towns, Draymond, Drummond, Klay Thompson, and Goran Dragic. I don't see how Klay Thompson actually fits in with the rest of those. Vince, am I missing something there? He's not exactly what you'd call a punt guy.
No, I mean maybe. No, I don't really see it where the punt is. I mean, with Drummond, you're definitely punting. I know there's been reports about Draymond Green figuring out how to adjust to his new role with the team has been a little bit more harder than he expected it to be. But I don't see him punting in any category. Same thing with Karl Anthony Towns. So, I mean, I like the team that you have. I mean, you got strong free throw shooters with Clay. Dragic isn't a terrible free throw shooter. Neither is Draymond nor Karl Anthony Towns. You got defense, and with Clay, you're gonna have a ton of threes. So, I mean,
Yes.
I don't really see where the punt is though.
It's an interesting question. So Drummond is obviously the punt guy in that mix. Draymond Green is not a great free throw shooter, but like Vince was saying, he's not a guy that really drags you down. I had him on my Roto team last year. I actually had Rudy Gobert and Draymond Green, and I still managed to take something like out of 11 teams, I think I was fourth from the bottom or fifth from the bottom. So I was able to kind of hang in there. Now, that being said, Andre Drummond is a punt all by himself. He will lose you free throws regardless of who else you have on your team because he is so bad. I mean, epically, historically bad. He makes DeAndre Jordan look like he knows what he's doing at the foul line, that he will take. So my issue with punting and J-Ball, in answer to your question, I hope you're listening to the show. We'll answer it to you via Twitter as well after we get off air. But my thought on punting, Vince, and you and I have talked about this before, is that if you're punting, that doesn't mean go and get the guys that are terrible at free throw shooting. It means just be aware. And I know everybody actually just watched my dog Gumshoe walk in the background of the video. Just be aware that if anybody else is punting. So you should know pretty early on, based on your competition, if anybody else in your league is doing the same thing as you. If they are, then you have to compete with those people for guys like Andre Drummond, for guys like Rudy Gobert and DeAndre Jordan, the massive defense guys that will bring you down in free throws. But the other side of that coin, and this is the important point I want to make once again, if no one else in your league is punting, those guys will fall to you. So get the non-punting guys first and pick up guys like Drummond, like Jordan, like whoever later on in the draft. Because if you're in a league with people who know what they're doing and they're not punting, Andre Drummond is not coming off the board that early. He's not a third-round guy if you're not punting. He will destroy you if you're not punting. So I don't mind your team, J-Ball. I think you should collect them in a different order, though. I think that you could use your third-round pick on somebody that's a little more well-rounded, somebody that's not going to be a drag, and then maybe reveal your strategy a couple rounds later and go rounds 5, 8, 10, or whatever on guys that would be a drag on other people's teams, but will actually round out your team pretty nicely. And I feel pretty strongly about that.
I don't know if that was the exact order that he got his team because I don't see how Klay Thompson falls in the fourth round in a lot of leagues. So
it's got to be a 10 league where maybe he went like 30. He said he's fifth, so that'd be 35th overall. That's pretty low, but I could imagine it because the rest of them seem to fit. You know, Cat at fifth, on 15th, Dragic at 45 in that league. The rest of those make sense. So maybe he's just in a league where people didn't really like Klay Thompson. But again, J-Ball, please feel free to let us know if we're answering your question sort of with misinformation on the order that things were going in. But Vince, if we assume for now that that's the order that he drafted his guys, wouldn't you rather see him take somebody else in the third round and maybe take Drummond in the fifth or sixth when he's aware if anybody else is punting?
Oh, yeah, and especially with the team that he currently drafted in those first two rounds with Draymond and Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, we've said it throughout all last week, and I think it's going to be something that we harp on for a little while now, and that's draft best player available. And when you're in that third round, I know for a fact there are more players that are best player available situations rather than Andre Drummond. So, and honestly, if you're punting, I don't think you want to match that with a guy like Klay Thompson, who is a strong free throw shooter. So, I mean, if you're punting, I think you got to start looking at different options, or you could have just waited a little bit longer, like the 5th or 6th round, to get a guy like Andre Drummond.
Yeah, I mean, the guys that are going around the 25th pick in a lot of at least Yahoo drafts, that's the numbers that I'm looking at right now, are guys like Porzingis, like Jokic. I've even seen John Wall fall into the 3rd round. Derek Favors is in that spot. So you can get guys that could be a lot more helpful for your team, and you can wait on Andre Drummond because he's really not getting drafted in that part right now. He's a mid-round guy. So don't jump the gun on those punt guys. I know you want them because you're punting, but just be aware that nobody else does. And Andre Drummond is pre-ranked on Yahoo as 65, and he finished last year as number 176 because of free throw shooting. So again, it's all about value in fantasy drafts. You want to make sure that you are taking guys not where you think that they can help you the most, but in a place where you can get them without losing them to someone else. And for Andre Drummond, that's much farther down the line. So reorganize there, J Ball. You can actually make a better team, and you'll thank us when you do. The follow-up, Vince, by the way, from our buddy Chris Snig, is that he's talking about players ranked maybe in the 100 to 175 range that could maybe be a top 50 guy in the next 2 to 3 years. So that's, again, we're talking about some niche stuff here, Vince. Off the top of your head, does anybody leap to mind in that one? I mean, I'll be honest here. You and I have the answer to a lot of questions, but that may be one where we need to do a little bit of digging.
Yeah, maybe. I think I would say Justin Anderson in Dallas. I think that would be a top 150 guy. I think he has that Jay Crowder play style that you can look at. So off the top of my head, I would choose him in 2 to 3 years. If you're keeping him on your roster, I think that's going to be a strong wing player to have on your team in 2 to 3 years.
And amazingly, Brandon Ingram actually falls into that category. Not that that's anything people know about him, but he's a top 150 guy that people are going to be watching. So certainly you'll have to keep your eye on him a little bit better if he's a guy that you want on your team for the long term. Zubin Petrayo on our chat room asks, do you think Brogdon will eventually start in Milwaukee, Vince?
I do. I think that there's a good chance that there's a strong argument that can be made that he starts opening night. So, I mean, I think Brogdon is probably their best shooter on their team. I'm not a huge fan of Michael Beasley. I think they'll use him more as like a 6-man type of player in Milwaukee. So, I think that there's a good chance that Brogdon sees quite a bit of minutes. So, to answer your question straightforward, I would say yes.
Oh, there you go. Easy answer. Alfred Payton question from Ben Carnado, one of our avid midday watchers. Ben, welcome back. Alfred Payton is still on the waiver wire, so I assume that means that, Ben, your draft is done. Should I pick him up? The point guards that Ben currently has on his team are James Harden, so I guess he has point guard eligibility. Avery Bradley, I'm assuming, is we've got the last name there, Jeff Teague and Tim Frazier, and D'Angelo Russell. Holy heck, Ben. You guys are starting a lot of guards in your league. Should I drop Tim Frazier for Alfred Payton? So that's the final question on that one. My thought on that one is probably, Tim Frazier he's going to see time in New Orleans, but you're talking about a guy in Alfred Payton that is pretty much guaranteed to see significant time. So to me, if you're looking for the safe play, that's Payton. I don't think either one of these guys is better than a top 150 guy, at least to start the year. But at least with Payton, you're going to get a guy who's going to get you some steals and some assists. Certainly from an efficiency standpoint, Payton will hurt you more in turnovers and free throw shooting. But Tim Frazier is not one of the stars in New Orleans, and Orlando is going to be utilizing a lot of Alfred Payton. So I would say yes, but only by a hair.
That stamp ready. Go ahead and stamp it.
Yeah.
Go ahead and stamp Alfred Payton.
Good call.
I would rather have Tim Frazier than Alfred Payton right now.
There's your little.
I think Alfred Payton, you know what you're going to get from him. He's He's going to get you the steals, but the turnovers are going to be high. The field goal percentage is going to be up and down. He can't hit free throws. So, and then with Tim Frazier, he's expected to be New Orleans starting point guard to start the season until Drew Holiday or Tyreek Evans can return. So we've seen what he can do as the team starter, and so the expectation is that he can be a top 100 guy at least to start the season. And I think if you have that on your roster right now, I would stick with that unless you already know that you're punting in free throw percentage and in turnovers, because that's what Elfrid Payton is going to help you do.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about Peyton's free throw situation. He shoots 59%, but he doesn't take very many. I guess my thought on this one really is, how long is Drew Holiday going to be out? Because for the first time in a long while, he's not out because he's injured. So he could potentially return pretty early on. I'm not Tyreek Evans to me is sort of a wash in that one. But once Drew Holiday is healthy, he's going to be taking a lot of those minutes back. So maybe, Vince, would you think Tim Frazier for a couple of weeks? He's not a guy that I fully trust for the entirety of this campaign.
You use him while he's out there playing, and then you can look for a different option that's out there on the waiver wire. I think Elfrid Payton is probably going to be he's out there for a reason, and so I think there'll probably be other guys on your waiver that you can probably look at and say, okay, this guy helps me in this area. And plus, you have a lot of guards on your team from what you need: Avery Bradley, D'Angelo Russell. Who else was there on that team that you had? I mean,
Harden point guard eligibility. Jeff Teague is also on that club. I feel like that's enough to sort of move guys around to fill the open roster spots. Wouldn't you think, Vince?
yeah, I mean, look for a small forward in there or a center or something. I mean, you got a ton of guards. You might need some help over there with your field goal percentage. But I mean, yeah, I mean, overall, I like your guard play as a whole. I mean, you have a lot of talented guards that are this season. I'm looking at Elfrid Payton as someone that I'm dropping Tim Frazier for right now. If you wanted to have
Yeah, something maybe as the season goes on that made me a little bit of a safer play. Ben asks a different question, not a follow-up. In Yahoo's NBA fantasy commercial a while back, Paul George mentioned championships are won in the draft. How do you feel about that? I strongly disagree, Ben, with Paul George's statement, unless you're in a very, very deep league. So again,
like a 30.
like a 30-team league. That's right, Vince. So, I mean, every player is off the board in that one. It was 12 rounds of 30 teams. So, I mean, you're talking about some truly absurd players that were drafted in that 30-team league. I was blown away at some of the guys that were going in the last round. I think my final pick, if memory serves, was Jordan Farmar. But that's far from some of the funnier names that came off the board. And I'm pretty sure the guy that drafted last just found the guy with the funniest name and took him. I don't even know that he's in the NBA. I feel like he just wrote him in, and in writing him in, he just took the 10 fingers on his two hands and just mashed a keyboard like this, and a name came out. But in terms of, an 8, 10, or 12-team league, no, Ben, you can do a lot after the draft. My team last year in a Roto League where I took second place, that had a games limit, by the way, which actually makes drafts even more important because benches actually become less relevant. I only finished the league with about half the guys that I drafted. In my head-to-head league, which doesn't have a games limit and actually does feature points a little bit more than other categories in kind of a twisted, roundabout way, I barely had half. So, no, Ben, my opinion is that championships are won by actually paying attention to the games during the season and making shrewd pickups that fill the needs on your team that you were unable to address in the draft. I almost never end up with guys that I drafted in my last 4 or 5 rounds, whether because I get tired of their inconsistency or I get a quick trigger finger or something. But to me, drafts are a great start, but championships are won by actually paying attention throughout the year and being quick on the draw, beating the other guys in that league to the key players that win you a league as that season goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also just like you said, it kind of depends on the league that you're in. But I mean, I've drafted a team that I've kept, with my entire roster until the end, and I make, trade some of my middle round guys. But I think it's just about your strategy throughout the season. I mean, I'm one of those guys that at least has to make a trade at least once throughout the year. I don't know why, but it's maybe one of those habits for me.
That's
But
great. If you
yeah,
can find a league where people are active in trading, that to me is a ton of fun. One of my leagues, I don't know that there was even one trade made the entire season.
really? Oh man, yeah, no. I have leagues that like a lot of people just talk a lot of trash to each other throughout the entire season. That you could have beat them in week 1, but when week 16 comes back and you're playing them again, or week 15 comes back and you're playing them again, they're like, "Oh, you got lucky." And so it's back to the trash talking and and trying to convince a lot of these guys to give you trades. It's like a lot of discussion. I remember last year it was a 2-week discussion on one of these trades that I was pulling, and I had to convince the person that this was a good deal for both sides. And then, we had a good question that came up yesterday, Dan, that I'll actually throw to you about trades, and it was about vetoes. And I thought it was kind of hard to answer a little bit, but in some of these deeper leagues or in some of the professional leagues that you're in, what are some of your guys' veto rules?
Well, I know that in one of my leagues, it is a league vote. And if you get a majority veto, it will veto it on its own. In the other of the two non-expert leagues that I'm in, these are just with friends and colleagues and acquaintances, it is commissioner only, which to me is actually the better way. And it looks like you disagree with me on that one. I really don't like when an entire league has the ability to clunk a trade just because they don't really like one of the guys on the two teams or one of the two team owners. To me, I prefer the one where the commissioner has final say because people in the league can still express their displeasure to the commissioner. And it's almost it's really more to me of like a judicial process in that way, where instead of just, 10 angry men that get to make a decision, it's if one or two of them have a legitimate beef and feel that a trade is distinctly one-sided and unfair, they can write the commissioner. They can write the two people involved in the trade and express their displeasure. And if the league agrees, then the commissioner can make the final call. But the commission might say, "Nah, you're being ridiculous. You're looking at this trade with rose-colored lenses or brown." Or I don't know. It doesn't matter what colored lenses would make it look like feces to a person. And they can shut that argument down. So if you trust your commissioner, I think that's the better way.
Yeah, I don't like it when people are colluding with one another. So I think a league vote is definitely something that you want to have. But I mean, you want to have that in an active league. So I think it kind of just depends on what type of league you're in. So hearing that side of it, where maybe you have to just trust your commissioner and being able to veto trades, is something that you want to look at when the league itself is not very active in communicating with one another. But I mean, I like talking trash to everyone in the chat board. So that's the type of leagues I'm always in.
Well, we're going to start doing that with some of our listeners here as we get more proficient at watching each other's faces, talking, and working the chat room. We can start talking trash with some of our buddies that are tuning in to get some answers. By the way, Vince, our friend J Ball says that he always watches your NBA Tonight show in the evenings, but he can't watch this one live right now. So fear not, we'll get that answer to you via Twitter when we get off air. But all of you guys listening to us live, you got that answer in real time. Vince, Chris Snig asked one more question. Will Jamal Murray be a better player than Emmanuel Mudiay by the end of this year?
That's actually a really good question. I mean, Mudiay is another one of those guys that we have stamped on this show as someone else's headache.
Would you like to play it, Vince? I'll play the noise for you.
Go ahead, play that noise for me one time. It also gives me some time to think.
3, 2, 1. That's all I bought you, though.
I'm going to go with yes. I'm going to go with yes to answer your question. Yes.
So you feel Jamal Murray then will be taking a lot of that playing time by the end of the year?
I don't necessarily think he'll be taking away the playing time. I really think that they're still intrigued with what Mudiay can be for the Nuggets. But Jamal Murray has ball handling ability. He has the ability to knock down 3-point shots and be a scorer for that team. So I think that they may use him a lot more in pick and roll sets and have him coming off screens and getting wide open shots. I want to see the pairing of him with Gary Harris on the floor with Jamal Murray running the point guard spot. But will he be a better player than Emmanuel Moody at the end of this year? I mean, I think that's a really good question. I'd say maybe 2 years, but I'm gonna still say yes to the question.
Fair enough.
But
Along
that's a
to
good one.
that's
Thanks for
yeah,
the
we
question.
got some good questions, man.
Take
These
that
guys,
thumbs up, but that was a good one.
these are good. These are tough ones. Man alive. Tamakar, who asked a question late last night with you guys, Vince, about betting, and I got all excited to answer it in the chat room because I don't know if people know this, but I actually worked for pregame.com for a couple of years. My buddy RJ Bell, who, if people are listening in that are in the Los Angeles area, I know he does a weekly appearance on the Mason and Ireland show on 710 AM radio. But I actually worked in sports handicapping for a couple of years. And Tama last night was asking about a bet between friends on Thunder and Rockets for win total at the end of the year. And I said, well, you should make sure that if you're betting on the Rockets, you get a little bit of odds in your favor. If you're going to make a bet with your friends, and this goes for anybody, make sure to check the Vegas lines on these things because they're pretty smart out there. And yes, there's value in those lines. But if Vegas thinks one team is going to win 2 games more than another, well, you should at least get good value on your bet. So that's a needless aside. But today, Tama asks, Marc Gasol, period, are threes coming this year? And is JaMychal Green worth a late flyer? For Marc Gasol on the three-point line, I'll believe it when I see it. He didn't really take any last year. So to me, it would be a little bit surprising to see him go from basically a goose egg to being a legitimate three-point threat. He might be one of those guys that, like Thad Young, who hits you about one every 2 weeks. So, if that's a yes, then I guess you could call it a yes. But I don't think he's a reliable source. In fact, maybe the best way that I can answer it is to say, look at his brother. Pau Gasol averaged 0.3 3-pointers per game last year, and that might be your best case scenario for Marc Gasol. On the JaMychal Green front, I would say yes. I think he is worth a late round flyer. He has an intriguing athletic ability, and Memphis is really being forced now to go a little bit younger finally, to get some of those crusty old farts off the floor because they just can't keep up. So to me, yeah, why not? Take him at the end of a draft, and if you've got patience to hold on for what's sure to be a bumpy ride, he could end up being kind of an interesting player. Vince, your thoughts on those two questions?
Marc Gasol, I don't see threes coming this year. I don't see that. I don't see that happening, especially now that Mike Conley's back being healthy. They're going to be trying to incorporate JaMychal Green, and who you're asking about is worth a late round flyer. I say yes. I think he's gonna. You saw what he can be as a starter. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they start transitioning him as now the primary starter for that team, and Zebo coming off the bench. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a guy that can get you a decent field goal percentage, and he also tends to like to fade on his shots, like try and scoot down to the 3-point range and into the corner. So he may give you the more threes than Marc Gasol this year. As for Marc Gasol threes, no, I just don't see that happening.
What about the JaMychal Green front?
Yeah, like I said, I definitely think he's worth a late round flyer. Like I said, he's going to be starting now. He's the primary starter for Memphis over Zebo. So and like I said, he may, I think, take more attempts from 3-point range and knock down more threes than Marc Gasol this season. But I think he's going to be you can look at him as a high, I won't say higher upside, but right around those same players if you look at a Julius Randle type of guy.
Interesting. So moving along chronologically here, best we can, Nicholas Cuenca asks, I'm drafting in an auction 16 team 9-cat 3-keeper league. Got that? Got that, Vince? This is the first we do keepers. I guess I'd like to know about general advice since it's a format people don't write much about. And Nicholas, you're right on that front. It really isn't a format that gets covered a lot. You see a lot of discussion of 9 and 8-cat, roto and head-to-head, but the auction side of things is a very finicky side because you do kind of have to know the people you're playing against to make good bids on players, while also, of course, maintaining some of your remaining budget. So in terms of an auction 16-team 3-keeper league, I can tell you, Nicholas, I've never been in a league like that before. Vince, have you ever done a league like that?
Not a 16-team auction 9-cat before, and 3 keepers. I mean, that's a mouthful.
That is a serious mouthful. So,
No, dude, no.
I mean, here's the issue that we face with you, Nicholas, and with the rest of you listening in. We are people that we think, Vince, at least that we know, you and I, a lot about fantasy sports, but this may be a spot where I just legitimately have to say I don't know. I don't want to say something that leads you astray. So rather than pretend to know something I don't, I don't have a good answer to that question.
Well, here's a way we can try and find a way to answer. How do you approach an auction draft, especially in a or just say a deep league auction draft? Because that's probably something that you've been a part of. I've been a part of a 14 team auction draft, and a lot of the things that I like to do when heading into my drafts is go in there with a budget for each of these players, and also try and start bidding, making the people start bidding on guys like Derrick Rose or Carmelo Anthony, because for some reason people love those type of players and they overbid, so you can try and get another guy like a Russell Westbrook while these other players are spending too much money on a guy like Carmelo Anthony and Derrick Rose in the beginning of drafts. So what are your thoughts on auction drafts in deeper leagues? Maybe that's something that you can give some
Yeah. Okay. That's a little bit more.
tips on.
If we sort of eliminate the keeper side of things, which does add a tough wrinkle to it. Yeah, I mean, my best advice in an auction 16 team league is to really do a ton of prep work. And I know it's a haul, and I know it's a time suck, but you've got to have a number in mind on pretty much everybody up until, what would you say, Vince? Like the first 120 players in a draft?
Well, I mean, you're going to get to the point where you're going to start getting players for $1. So I would say, like, yeah, maybe once you get to that top 100, I mean, every dollar matters when you're trying to, I mean, there's going to be players that you get for $1. And so that's something you're looking at. And for keeper, just to kind of bring that up there, you're normally looking at the guys that if you guys are going to be doing this from now on in your dynasty, it's going to be basically a dynasty league. So what player do you think is going to be consistent next season for you? So if you have James Harden with your pick and you happen to bid on him and you have him, you are going to want to keep James Harden on your team. That's a keeper that you're going to want to have. Nikola Jokic, do you think he's going to have more upside than he did this upcoming season for his breakout year? You're going to want to keep him. So you're going to want to keep the guys that you think are going to be overpriced for next season in an auction, who thinks their value is going to go up and you're going to have to bid more for them, and two, has the potential to be a consistent player for multiple years to come if this is going to be a long-term dynasty type of league.
That's a really, really good point, Vince. I want to take almost a brief pause here to let people reflect on that last notion. Everything in fantasy sports and frankly in the sports betting world too is about value. So the key on the keeper aspect, Nicholas, is that you have to be looking ahead to who you think will cost you more next year, and you would want them again. So guys on the decline, don't keep them because they'll go for a lower price. You can recoup some of that money. But yes, if there's a young fella that you think is only going to get better, certainly like a traditional keeper league, those are the guys that you want to keep long term. But in an auction league, it really comes down to whether they're going to be better year over year. If they're going to have a big season this year, and their price is going to go up. So maybe that's the best advice of all. Well said, Vince, and I hope that one sunk in nicely. Our buddy Movie Dude asks, what kind of numbers can you expect from Delhi now that he's the real, and he put that in quotation marks to really make sure that it sunk in, point guard. Vince, what are you looking for from Matthew Dellavedova? Because for me, I'm looking for a guy that will basically be assists only and maybe a three-pointer chipped in every now and again, but certainly a late-round guy that's worth looking at.
On flyer guy, you take him in your later rounds of your draft. If you need a point guard, he'll get you maybe like 4 or 5 assists. He'll get you maybe a three-pointer and a half on the year. I'd say closer to 8 to 10 points. You're going to expect what you saw in Cleveland. You're not going to see into the Dellavedova that's in Milwaukee. Yes, he'll probably get more minutes and he'll be throwing the lobs instead of LeBron James to Giannis Antetokounmpo and setting up other players. So I don't think you should expect too much from Dellavedova, but I really like Dellavedova's game as a late round pick if that's who you're looking at. He doesn't hurt you in field goal. He doesn't hurt you in free throws. He'll get you the occasional steal. He'll get you the 3-pointers. He's one of the team's best 3-pointers on that team this season. So they're going to need him on the floor. Plus, like you said, he's the only true real point guard that they have. I don't really look at Michael Carter-Williams as a a true option as their number one, but you're
Well,
going to see Michael
gone.
Carter Williams. What was that?
Michael Carter Williams, he's gone now, isn't he? He's in Chicago.
Oh, that's right. That trade just happened. We didn't even talk about that. I almost forgot about that trade. He's in Chicago. What a pairing! I tell everyone Michael Carter Williams is the young Rondo. Now they're together.
Well, now they can at least tutor one another. So I think, Vince, by the way, I think that's the reason that this question came up, is that you're probably going to see Dellavedova hit the 30-minute mark. But one little warning I'd like to issue on the Delhi front is that he did actually play 24 minutes a game last year, which may surprise a lot of people because it didn't seem like he was on the floor all that much. And in 24 and a half minutes a game, he averaged 7.5 points, 4.5 assists, and half of a steal. 1.33 pointers is really the only redeeming number in that collection. Now, admittedly, he was never going to be an offensive option in Cleveland. There were too many guys around him that could score the basketball. But that's his nature. He's not a scorer. He's a guy that is a pass-first point guard who plays hard-nosed defense but would rather get under somebody's skin than steal a ball away from them. So he's not a high steals guy. He's not a good scoring guy. He is exclusively going to take probably 4 or 5 3-point tries from downtown, and he'll probably make 1.5 to 2 of them. And in 30 minutes a game, I could see him getting 6.5 to 7 assists per night. So to me, yes, definite guy to look at in the very late rounds of a draft, but don't go reaching for him just because his minute total went up. He is not a high producing guy, even given the minutes, but he could be kind of a safe end of the draft pickup. And I think that's really what you should be expecting from a guy like Dellavedova. Zubin.
Right. And
sorry, go ahead, Vince.
I was actually going to throw in the per 36 numbers that he did last season. I think that this is a good base of maybe what you can expect from him this year, because I do think Dellavedova is a nice fit for this Milwaukee team as the team starting point guard. So in per 36 from last season, it was 11 points, 6.5 assists, and 1.93 pointers on 40% shooting. So
there you go. I don't even think he's going to hit 36 minutes this year. I think he'll be more around 30 to 32. So maybe even peel a tiny bit off of that. And
that's why I'm saying like 8 to 10 points and maybe 5 assists and a 3-pointer and a half is, I think, fair expectation for a guy like Dellavedova this season.
Which is, to me, not that helpful in a head-to-head league, but could be useful in a roto league where maybe you could dump him in if your point guard gets hurt for a week, and he'll keep you from basically sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Zubin Petrayo asks, do you think Linsanity classifies as a punt field goal percentage guard? And in an unrelated question, Zubin went back-to-back here, so we'll hit him at the same time. In a Dynasty real salary format, who's better, Alex Len or Yusuf Nurkic? So, Vince,
that's a good one.
I'll take, if you don't mind, I'll take question 1, and then I'll throw it over to you for question 2, because I think you have more experience in the Dynasty format than I do. To me, Jeremy Lin there really, to me, isn't really any guy in the league that can be a pure punt field goal percentage guy on his own. But certainly Jeremy Lin will hurt you quite a bit in that category. He's not going to be a guy that makes a ton of his shots. He shot 41% last year in what should have been a more efficient role for him, which was basically soaking up some backup minutes in Charlotte. Now he slides into a spot where he's going to be a little bit more of a focal point. But to me, if he can keep the turnovers in check, and it's a big if, but they are better last year than they were when he was sort of the primary guy. Is that him turning a corner? I don't know exactly yet. But the short answer to your question is yes, he would fit in that category, but there are other guys you're going to certainly want to stack around him if you are truly punting field goal percentage. What I mean by that is he's not going to do it by himself, but if you put Jeremy Lin on your team and, you buttress him with maybe a big man like Kevin Love, 42% big man, he's filling your center spot. Trevor Ariza, he's a sub 40% guy. It's a ton of work to punt field goal percentage, but it's doable, and there's a way to do it where you want to look at each individual position. I really don't like Jeremy Lin all that much. I think Jake Cousins last night is a bigger fan of him than I am. I think that the bad outweighs the good, certainly in a roto league. I actually don't mind Jeremy Lin in a head-to-head league because he is a popcorn numbers kind of guy, and those are a little bit more valuable on a week-to-week basis where things like field goal percent, free throw percent, and turnovers can fluctuate so wildly. It's nice to have somebody that's going to just stuff your sheet with points, rebounds, and assists, and maybe some steals and threes. So that's my take on question one. Vince, thoughts, if you have any, on Jeremy Lin as a punt guard, and then Len or Nurkic in a dynasty league?
You got that Jalen Rose thing queued up for me real quick?
And I read... Oh, no, I right-clicked instead of left-clicking. It was going to be so good if it was on time, but I'll play it now anyway.
Got to give the people.
What exactly are we giving them?
Give the people what they want.
Vince, give them what they want.
All right, so Jeremy Lin, he's a late-round guy. Is he punting field goal? I don't think so, but I definitely think he's going to be up and down throughout the season. I think he's going to be right around 43%. That's not terrible. That's like picking up a guy like, I don't know, or Rudy Gobert, who's not a great free throw shooter, but he also doesn't hurt you when he's around 70% from the free throw line. So I'd consider him something like that, but he's going to get as many shots as he can handle, or as many minutes as he can handle, and probably initiate the offense a majority of the time with Brook Lopez. I still love that it's Brook and Lynn, and Brooklyn is the name.
That's nice. I bet there's some bootleg T-shirts right outside the arena going right now.
Also, I want to see what hairdos Jeremy Lin has, because that also may, come into play when I'm looking at him on my waiver or something like that. Like, hey, does he have the Goku hairdo? All right, he's about to go Super Saiyan. Add him to my lineup. That's nerdy stuff right there, but I still said it anyways. As for the...
Listen, Vince, I got to cut you off here. We talked about Pokemon for 2 weeks on this show, so we're way above that. The rungs to fall, they are well beneath us. But please continue, my good man.
So I've looked over. This was probably the hardest question of the day so far, and that's the Alex Len and Yusuf Nurkic question, right? And you're looking at Yusuf Nurkic, and he's been a little bit injured. So is Alex Len, but he's over the next 2 years until he becomes a restricted free agent. Nurkic is making $3 million, and the next year $4 million. Over the next 2 seasons with Alex Len, before he becomes a restricted free agent, it's $4 million, then $6 million, and these are rounded up numbers, just so you guys know. Who gets the payout of the two? There's a lot of expectation on Nurkic being able to have that breakout year and playing that combo of Jokic and Nurkic together in Denver, and I'm very intrigued to see what that's going to be. And Alex Len, there's a lot of hype of what his potential is, and Phoenix seems to still be rolling with him and think that he's going to be something. I've hit the brakes on him. You see it at times, but we talked about it on last night's show. His value is going to be like this all year long. Up and down. It's going to be coming in waves, so you want to get them at the right time. But if I had to choose between the two on who I'm keeping in a dynasty, I think salary, and you said it's salary, and I think I think the bigger salary is going to go to Alex Len. And I also think that Denver wants to lock up Nurkic because he is also in Michael Malone's doghouse. So he's going to be out there to the people for him to be looking at. And although I do think Denver's going to want to bring him back, I'm going to roll with Nurkic on your question. I don't know who asked it, but you, the person who asked that question, I'm looking right at the camera right now, Dan. That hard question. You put my knowledge to the test on this one. I had to go on the internet while Dan went on his long monologue about Jeremy Lin and just look up these contracts because I wanted to answer that for you. So I gave the people what they wanted, Dan, and thank you for your hard question. It was a lot of fun.
That's a good one, man. Zubin coming in strong. You win the hardest question of the day award, stealing it away from Nicholas Cuenca, who asked about the 16-team 9-category 3-keeper league. I can't even without chuckling. Nicholas, that is really quite a week. We're winding down here. We've got one more real question, and then we'll close it out with kind of a funny question from our crowd. Jessica Lau asks, in regular format auction drafts, do you guys like to spend early or spend late? Vince, I'm an early guy because I believe that I can find key guys on the waiver wire. Where do you stand with this one?
I think it really doesn't matter. I think you get the players that you want. You have to go into each auction draft with the budget. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the show. I like to enter each auction with the budget. You're going to get guys at the end of your draft and in the middle of your draft, normally at those prices. So you're going to get the dollar players at the end of your draft, so you know what you're making up your roster to be. So in the beginning, if you're letting everyone else throw out their money on guys like a Derrick Rose or a Carmelo Anthony, then if the guy like a Russell Westbrook comes up or a James Harden, that, yeah, you spend your money on those guys. Why? Because those are going to be the players that carry your team. So you can't be afraid of throwing your money at certain players. So spend early, spend late. I think you want, I guess I would agree with you. You want to spend early on the players that you want to get, because come into play no matter what at the end of your drafts.
Very well done. Movie Dude snuck a real question in here, and I think we do actually have time to get to it, because that one, Vince, we were able to knock out in about 2 minutes, and then we'll circle back to the funny questions that the chat room is hitting right now. Movie Dude says, everyone's been raving about Nikola Jokic, but Yusuf Nurkic has been the one destroying people in the preseason. Why am I getting bad Roto World flashbacks? First, Vince, I should mention, yeah, we're allowed, actually, by the way, to say Roto World on this podcast. We're even though we're in competition with them. So I said it. But Vince, the thoughts on that one, I think it really comes down to the ability to do many things. Yusuf Nurkic is a little bit more limited in the categories that he's going to be able to contribute in. Jokic is a guy that's like Nurkic, but can pass, can shoot from outside, and is a better free throw shooter. Am I hitting the key points there? But Vince, it also feels like both of those guys are going to be seeing pretty decent run this year.
I think Jokic is the guy that you're looking at and you're saying he's guaranteed the minutes. He's proved what he can do in Olympics. It seems like Denver is really high on him. Michael Malone seems really high on him. Nurkic last year was in the team's doghouse, or Michael Malone's doghouse. But now they've done nothing but rave about him, about how fit he is and how active he has been through the preseason. And we've seen the numbers. I mean, he looks great this preseason. So I fully understand it. But at the same time, I'm going to do it like I always do on a lot of these shows, because it is only preseason as well. And I have this weird itch and this weird feeling in my stomach that you're going to see Kenneth Faried as the team starter to build his value, because I think they're going to look to move him this year, because they do want to roll off that combo. I think you're going to see that combo a little bit. Plus, another thing that worries me is that Michael Malone keeps talking about this really small lineup that they're going to start going to, which my only assumption is this Danilo Gallinari is going to be the 5, with maybe Wilson Chandler and Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, and Emmanuel Mudiay. Like, I think that's a lineup that they're really looking at right now, because he keeps bringing up this really small lineup that they're going to try, and they're going to be experimenting with different things. They're going to go kick at the 5 and Gallo at the 4. They're going to play around with the lineup a little bit. So that's why I say Jokic has the value over Nurkic, even though Nurkic has been exploding through the preseason.
I think, to me, these are certainly all guys that Jokic is a little bit more of a safe bet, certainly in what he's doing when he's on the floor. If Nurkic does stay healthy, he's certainly a guy that can help you out more in the blocks category than Jokic. To me, there's certainly value with both of these guys. Yusuf Nurkic is again, like Vince said, he's a little bit more of a crapshoot in terms of where the minutes are going to be falling. Jokic is the guy where the minutes are a little bit more safe right now. If the whole Denver situation scares you, you can still win your fantasy league without drafting a single nugget. So don't feel like you need to end up with one of these guys. Just remember that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And if the Denver situation is a little bit unnerving, I know for me, talking about all those lineups that Vince was mentioning, it gives me a mild case of IBS over here. So I might be one of those guys that just dodges Denver altogether, because the hype train is coming in hot right now, and you're going to be fighting with people to get some of these Nuggets big men. So maybe let everybody else fight and let somebody drop to you a little bit. Again, more than one way to the league.
Talked about it on yesterday's show about Victor Oladipo and about how, is he a second round pick type of guy, and where the potential is there for him to be. I mean, he could, like Jake Cousins said yesterday on Monday's show, he'll be joining me every Monday night on Fantasy NBA Tonight. Joining in tonight. Also, nice little plug.
Great, by the way, Jake. I thought Jake did a wonderful job.
He has I believe last year, and Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong because you're a better guy with the numbers off the top of your head with this stuff. But even with Scott Skiles restraining him last year in Orlando, he was able to put up top 40 value and finish like 4th round value last year. Victor Oladipo was, and so now you're looking at him. Okay, he's about to be truly unleashed in OKC. He can be a top 20 guy and be a monster, being that he can fill up a stat sheet for you with steals, the 3-pointers. If he can start knocking those down, the field goal percentage isn't terrible. He knocks down his free throws. He could be an elite shooting guard in this league. That's true. I fully understand that. But if he was a top 40 guy last year, I want to take him maybe a round earlier, not 2 rounds earlier, and hoping that he's that second round potential. Same thing with a guy like Jokic. Everyone is assuming he's going to have that second round value because of the Olympic play, because of what he was able to do last season towards the end of the year, and even in the middle of the year when they started playing him. Those other guys reach, because let's say anything bad happens. Now you're when you draft a guy like a Victor Oladipo or a Jokic in the second round, you do have to know that you're taking the risk that you're picking them for their potential to be that second round player. So that's been my biggest issues with a lot of these guys being taken in those first couple rounds, because yes, they have the potential to be that type of player. They can meet that value, but you're still picking them with the risk of hoping that they're going to meet that value.
Yeah, 100% agree with the way that you're breaking that thing down, Vince. To me, I would feel more comfortable taking a guy in the second round that has been there before. And I know that's maybe a little bit of kind of a shy way to draft, but if I'm in
the Depot John Wall question yesterday.
Yeah, it's an exact comparison. So you've got a guy that you know is going to get you top 30 value. That's the seller for somebody like John Wall, if he's even borderline healthy for most of the year. So barring like a catastrophic injury, and that's the way that we discuss all this stuff, especially with guys that have shown themselves to be pretty durable over the years, you'd rather take somebody with a nice floor at that early part of the draft. As you start to move towards the middle rounds and the late rounds, that to me is where you take somebody where the floor could fall out, but you could also get a really high ceiling. So that's not to say that Jokic won't be a top 30 guy or that Victor Oladipo won't be a top 20 guy. You just don't know. You just don't know. And at that early part of the draft, everybody's also looking
to take a no.
Exactly, Vince. Exactly. And you're not surprising anybody. Everybody out there knows about Victor Oladipo. Everybody out there is aware of Jokic. Even Yahoo has Jokic now as the number 25 guy overall. So if the big websites are onto it, that means that we're not ahead of the curve anymore. So try to find your value somewhere else if some of these questions are kind of giving you that upset tummy, and then you kind of move on to it. So I wanted, unfortunately, any of the questions that were asked during our answer to that question are not going to get addressed. Don't worry, though, everybody. Vince, you'll be on air at 9 p.m. tonight, right?
That will be on at 9 p.m. tonight. I think my co-host is Aaron Bruski, but I could be mistaken on that as well. But from what I believe, it is Aaron Bruski tonight, Tuesday night on Fantasy NBA Tonight with me, Vince Miracle, and my co-host, Aaron Bruski. Notice how I say his name second? Yeah, because people voted for me.
I'm sure
people voted for me.
That's right. So I don't. We'll look up the schedule and we'll make sure, Vince, you're going to have a number of new hosts this week, which is going to be a lot of fun. We're getting all those hoopball voices out into the podcasting realm. Brewski will certainly be one of them. The Donani brothers are going to be getting to work this week. There's another Jake. His last name is Fitzgibbons. I think he's going to be over the weekend. We've got John Sill. He's going to be on Thursday. So there's a lot of voices, and I'm really excited to kind of let everybody meet the folks, Vince, that you've been working with very closely, and I've had a chance to communicate with a little bit. I believe tonight that you are going to have, is it John? No, I'll double check on that. But don't worry, you're going to have somebody really cool tonight. That's all you really need to know. The last question before we shut this thing down was the funny one. I figured we could answer it in 30 seconds and then put a bow on this thing. Ben asked, in our league, we are introducing an award for the worst record of the season, which I presume is like the Sacco, for those of you that watch the league. It'll be the WWE Divas Champion Belt. Vince, Ben wants to know, is his league being too harsh?
No, your league isn't being harsh enough. Not only should they wear that WWE belt, no matter what game you guys have, if you guys are all living in one area, like I'm in a league where a lot of my players are a lot of my fantasy owners are in Sacramento, right? Or if you listen to my show, the King's Court podcast, we make weekly bets on a lot of these game predictions on my show. You guys should go check it out. Subscribe to the YouTube channel or to the iTunes channel. But you should have them dressed up in that thing, dressed like a WWE diva at a basketball game, and have them take pictures with everyone that is there.
Yeah.
Make it more harsh, because you know what? It's their fault they lost. If they forgot to set out their roster that week, if they didn't make the right trade and they got guilted into a trade or they got stooped into a trade, that's their fault. Make them suffer, because they'll never want to lose again. It makes your league way more competitive.
Yeah, I love it. Just nothing that's intolerant of anybody else's culture, please. That's my one request. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, make it funny, make it fun. Somebody else mentioned, by the way, let me see if I can make sure I get the person who wrote it correct before I attribute credit. Oh, it's our buddy Nicholas in the Insane Auction Keeper League. He said last year the worst record team had to write an erotic poem to the winner. I think that's hilarious. And Nicholas, I may steal that for something. Vince, maybe next time you and I have an on-air vote, the other one of us will have to write a Dr. Seuss-like erotic poem to the other. What do you think?
Roses are red, violets are blue. Dan, I'm so glad I do this show with you.
Oh, that's nice. It's not erotic. That was actually really friendly.
Bam.
But it made me feel...
Bam, that was for you, Dan.
It made me feel so good. To Nicholas, I know you asked a question late in this thing. We will unfortunately not have time to get to it because we are actually over by 2 minutes right now. Big crowd today. It's more every single show. It means the NBA season must be coming. He is Vince Miracle, VM Center on Twitter. I'm Dan Besbris. If you can spell it, you can find me on Twitter. Actually, you can see the spelling right there on the YouTube page if you're watching us live. If you're watching the recorded version, you could probably find my name at hoop-ball.com, our lovely benefactor for all of these podcasts there at Hoopball Tweets on the internet as well. He's Vince Miracle. I'm Dan Besbris. Again, Vince back with you tonight at 9 p.m. for Fantasy NBA Tonight. Free previews these days of a lot of these shows. Fantasy NBA Today will always be free. Fantasy NBA Tonight will eventually be exclusively to paid subscribers. So certainly think about chiming in on that one and giving the good folks at Hoopball a couple of your bucks, because frankly, it ain't that many. And it'll be well worth it, especially, by the way, Vince, once you guys are doing all those nightly breakdowns right as the games are ending. We will be the only website doing a live podcast at the end of the NBA schedule. Vince, I think that went pretty well. What do you think?
I think it went awesome, and I also want to bring up the fact that with these draft guide purchase people or the premium subscribers to hoop-ball.com, not only are they going to be getting the premium shows of Fantasy NBA Tonight live with myself and whoever my fantasy expert will be on the show. Sometimes Dan will actually be on there. Dan, you'll be hosting Wednesday shows for me, actually, because the wife says I need a break every once in a while. But I do, especially with a baby on the way. By the way, we need to start giving out tips on this show like we used to earlier on when we started doing this podcast. But one thing I want to let you guys know that will also be happening every single Sunday. It will be a Sunday night show once the season begins. Is a waiver wire show that Aaron Bruski will be hosting by himself, and he'll be talking about all the hot waiver wire players that you want to look at, whether it be a deep league, standard league, auction league, roto league, 9-cat head-to-head. He'll go into all of that, as well as answering your guys' question on the show about those waiver players, and that's going to be Sunday nights once the season begins. You guys will not get a teaser for that. I believe so. You're not going to be getting a teaser for that. So if you want to help in that in-season stuff and you want to have that fantasy expert of Aaron Bruski, who was the Fantasy Sports Writer Award winner back in 2015, giving you waiver wire suggestions, go purchase that draft guide right now. It's on sale for $17.99, or become a premium member for hoop-ball.com. And also, do us a huge favor, guys. Hit that thumbs up button on this video so that we know that you guys love this video. And if you haven't done so yet, hit subscribe. And I'll be seeing you guys tonight at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah, the subscribe button, that is our gold over here. So if you're out there and you're watching, click it. That way you can get the quick alerts every time we go on air. Heaven forbid we do a show sort of off the cuff that we haven't planned. That would be a wonderful way to make sure that you are there. and you'll get an alert when that takes place. Vince, by the way, you are with Riaz tonight. I managed to take a moment to check that out. So the
Denani, the Denani brother.
They're getting involved. I'll have Zane on the Wednesday morning show, and that's our next couple of programs. So we're ramping it up over here. The season starts, ladies and germs, in 1 week. 1 week. I almost can't believe it. I am thrilled. I know everybody's got to go back to work. So do we. Thanks so much for tuning in. This was Fantasy NBA Today, a hoopball presentation. For Vince, I'm Dan. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Peace out.